So Laurel, I am pleased to be able to introduce her to you. She is a life and leadership coach, a speaker, and founder of Flux+Flow professional coaching. Laurel helps high-performing professionals overcome overwhelm and disillusionment by increasing self-awareness and shifting perspectives so they can improve performance, increase their personal contribution, and experience a greater sense of fulfillment and purpose. Laurel has worked in both the public sector and private sector, in legal services, government relations, and the electric utility industry. She has experience in environmental, permitting and compliance, regulatory and government affairs, emergency management, community relations, and corporate communications. She has also experienced and recovered from burnout. So she's speaking from the heart and experience. And she has lots of other fun things like a Reiki master, a yoga practitioner. And Laura lives right here in New Hampshire. She summers in Maine. And let's give a warm welcome to Laurel.
Thank you, Heather. I am so happy to be here with you this morning. I have been a regular participant, virtual and in person, maybe for a little over a year. And I always look forward to these mornings of networking and learning. So I am here today to talk about burnout. And I just want to mention right up from the beginning, as Heather said, I have experienced burnout. With that career that you just heard about, it was a roller coaster. And before we start talking about all of the things, I want to remind you there is no season for burnout, there is no age, there is no gender. It is a problem for all of us, and we're all at risk in some way. Before we start, I want to play a game of 20 questions. I was thinking it would be really fun to do a never have I ever, but that's a little complicated. So if you have a piece of paper, a pen, even opening up a note, I'm going to read a list of questions, and I just want you to mark a T next to the number if it was in fact true for you. The emojis at the bottom, if you're ready, we can start. You can give a thumbs up. So, number one, have you ever worked on weekends, stayed late, gone in early, simply to make a good impression? Number two, have you worked late, volunteered for a new project, or to take on another task to prove what a team player you are? Three, have you emailed, responded, or sent emails, paid attention to your email outside of a normal workday? Maybe on the weekends, on vacation, right before you go to bed at night. Number four, have you thought as soon as work slows down, you will go back to the gym, take better care of yourself, get more sleep? Number five, have you gone to work when you're sick because the work has to get done and there's no one else to do it? Number six is, have you only ever taken 1 week off at a time because you have way too many responsibilities, too much work, and there's no one to delegate to? Number seven is, have you worried about what others will think if you take too much vacation time, if you don't work on weekends, if you don't reply to email outside of work hours? Number eight is, have you tried to get caught up, maybe staying late just to finish one more thing? Number nine, do you wish you had more control over your schedule, your workload, your task and responsibilities? Number 10, do you have no interest or little interest in work events or creating friendships at work? Number 12, do you dread Sunday evenings? Just the thought of Monday morning and going back to work causes you that angst. Number 13, have you ever counted the days until the weekend, the weeks until your next vacation, or even the years until you can retire? Number 14, have you felt stuck in a job? Maybe because of the salary, the benefits, the length of time, the years of service. Have you ever felt, this is number 15, have you ever felt that a new job is exactly what you need? It'd be the perfect solution to everything you're feeling. Number 16, have you canceled plans or missed an event because you're just too busy, you're too exhausted? 17, have you ever backed your car into two stationary objects in one day? Number 18, have you ever been stopped for speeding 3 times in a single work week? Number 18, have you ever had a boss voodoo doll and kept it in your desk drawer at work? Number 20, have you ever quit a job without having another job to go to? So I'd love to hear, maybe you can drop in the chat, just count up the number of items on that list that were T's, the number that were true for you. And if you're willing, put them in the chat. So we're seeing numbers that are maybe 12, 13, 12, 11, 15, 14. There are some numbers that are below 10, sevens, a couple fours, a 5. So I just have to say, if you are someone that has fewer T's and more blanks or faults, hooray, congratulations. Because the T's, as you know, are all of the stress, maybe reactions and behaviors that lead to burnout. So I'm going to tell you my results. My results, 20 out of 20. Yes, I've done all of those things. You know, what started as ordinary stress, overwhelm, really did lead to burnout. So when you think about the small things that we do when we're stressed or overwhelmed, like how many of you have maybe misplaced your keys? Or maybe you have forgotten where your car is in a parking lot. I did those things, and I did more. Like the day that I misplaced a cup of coffee, and later that evening I found it in the freezer. There was a day that I put my dirty laundry in the kitchen trash can instead of the hamper. And yes, I did back into two stationary objects, a dumpster and a snowbank in one day. And I was stopped for speeding 3 times in a single work week. And I'll tell you more about that later. And I actually had a boss voodoo doll in the desk drawer at work. Now, all of those were signs of burnout, but I was unaware. You know, I was sarcastic. Sometimes I was cynical. Sometimes I was disillusioned. Sometimes, and I was stressed. I was really on this roller coaster of burnout. And I was just cycling through the stages of burnout. I was really a proud overachiever. I was intent on meeting expectations, outpacing my peers, and I was really motivated. I loved the work I did. I was motivated by the approval of others, the rewards of the systems that I worked within, recognition, advancement, salary increases. At times, I had great pride and purpose from the work I did, and other times I didn't. Sometimes my purpose and enthusiasm dwindled, and when that happened, so did I. At least until I found another job and started the cycle all over again. So the cycle, it's a new job, high satisfaction, the onset of stress, chronic stress, burnout, back into a new job. I had a lot of survival strategies on how to manage my career, but I didn't really have any strategies on how to manage my stress to avoid burnout. And so here it is, after a lengthy career, my own burnout and my experience led me to coaching. Now I help others increase their satisfaction, contribution, improve performance, and their fulfillment. And I help them recognize and recover from burnout. So my story is not unique. There's been a lot of research recently, especially since 2019, when the World Health Organization classified burnout as a workplace phenomenon. Some of the research shows 89% of employees experience burnout in the last year. 40% of employees have left a job because of burnout. 67% report that they have experienced an increase in stress and burnout since the pandemic. We've seen a 21% increase in burnout between December 2020 and July 2021. And then reports are showing a 52% increase between 2020 and 2022. And then there's remote employees who experience 80 or report 87% of remote employees are experiencing burnout, which means that they are in the same boat as employees who are reporting to an office. Women are 21% more likely to experience work stress, and young women are more vulnerable and at risk for burnout. Millennials are reporting 2 times more burnout than baby boomers. And why does this matter, you might ask? Why does it matter? Because there's a significant cost to businesses and to us, to the individuals who work for those businesses. The cost to business are things like low productivity, high turnover, loss of the most talented employees. The impact to the US economy, based on recent research and reports, is an average of $300 billion a year. Now let's talk about the cost to employees and individuals like me and you. There are lost wages that often come from changes in jobs, time off, less, being less productive. Maybe you get lower increases, salary increases, lower bonuses, and your salary generally suffers over time. And then there's the increased expenses that are related to, my favorite is a lifestyle of ease. We tend to spend money on things that make our life more comfortable and easier while we are working more. There's also increased expenses related to healthcare, wellness, and even some of the activities that we do to maybe relax, dining out, consumption, and vacations, I suppose, which are well worth it. And then there's the loss. We suffer some loss in relationships, in our purpose, our identity, our self-worth, and our contribution. Not just our contribution to work, but our contribution to our families and our communities. So, all of that said, what exactly is burnout? Well, I suppose knowing some of you and all of you coming here this morning, you all have some idea of what burnout is. If you were one of the 91,000 people that Google what is burnout every month, you would find a definition that was something about emotional, physical, mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. Burnout. It was a term that was coined in the 70s to describe the consequences of severe stress and high ideals in helping professions. And I loved that, helping professions. I would imagine as an employee, we all believe that we are in helping professions. More recently, burnout has been defined as a systemic disconnect between a person's true self and their expectations about their work. So we think about burnout being overwhelmed, overwork, and I want to talk about three types of burnout. Overload burnout is one of the types of burnout where we sacrifice our health and well-being for the work that we do. The next one is under challenged burnout. That happens when you are bored, maybe you are not challenged, you're indifferent about the work that you do. This often happens when your skill set is not aligned or used in the job that you're doing. The third type of burnout is neglect. Now, this one is not necessarily that you neglect yourself, but that you are feeling neglected as an employee. You're not acknowledged or you're unacknowledged, and you're feeling like the work that you do is not important, not making a difference, causing you to feel unimportant. Three types of burnout. They all have similar causes or contributing factors. So when your workload is unsustainable, you have a lack of control over the work that you're doing or the way that you have to work, the amount that you work. There's a lack of fairness, or you perceive a lack of fairness in the workplace, that your skills and talents are mismatched. Your values are not aligned with the work that you do or the company that you work for. Insufficient rewards, where you're not being rewarded for the effort that you put in, and lack of support in the workplace. That's a lot. So now you know the what it is, the why it happens, and why it's a problem. Let's talk about how to recognize it, the signs and stages of burnout. The most common signs, I'm going to give you three. Dissatisfaction. So this often happens with when you're feeling like just general dissatisfaction, the lack that you lack the feeling of accomplishment, perhaps. The next most common is disconnection or detachment, that you really are detached from your workplace, your community, at the workplace, and the work that you do. And this one often leads to cynicism. The third is apathy, and apathy shows up or is described by this lack of energy, lack of enthusiasm, lack of motivation, leads to lack of confidence. And often these three signs of burnout are confused with depression. So I want to hear in the chat, if you would, just some feedback. What is your biggest takeaway so far? Any aha moments in what we've covered? I'm seeing some um, confirmation or reinforcing what um, someone has been thinking. Stephanie says that she never realized being unchallenged could be lead to burnout. I think Jen, burnout mistaken for depression is a big one. And that's really a lot of good feedback. So thank you for that. Um, there's so much more that we could talk about. I want to move into the stages of or phases of burnout. So, like any cycle, there are stages of burnout. And I want to just tell you that it is cyclical, but not necessarily linear. And so you might bounce around from one phase to the next. You might hijack the cycle, like I did with a new job. I think that's pretty common. These stages. The first stage is the honeymoon stage. The emoji. We are happy. We are eager. This is my story. This is why I took a new job. It built my confidence. It gave me external feedback or confirmation that I was good at what I did. I was eager to please and perform. And so the story of my being stopped for 3 times for speeding in one single work week. I was in the honeymoon stage at a new job. About 9 months in, I was working for a law firm. And the period of time around this particular work week was a significant federal deadline for about 6 clients. I worked about 100 hours in 10 days. I also had a 1 hour each way commute from work. And at the time, I was overwhelmed. I was distracted. I was running on adrenaline. I got very little sleep. And I did all of those things. Well, the excuses that come up. Whatever reason I did them seemed necessary or important at the time. I did not get a ticket, but getting stopped for speeding 3 times in a single week was a warning sign for me, one that I should have recognized. The next stage number 2, is the onset of stress. You know that emoji. There's decreased satisfaction in what you're doing. You have less optimism. Maybe your focus and productivity is decreasing. Your irritability is increasing. This is the point where common physical stress symptoms show up. Chronic headaches, maybe the occasional, well, I don't want to say chronic headaches, occasional headaches, grinding your teeth, indulging in an after work beverage because you just need to relax. Your sleep is impacted. You work harder. This leads us to work harder to try to catch up, be more productive, and we start to neglect other areas of our life. So, this stage, the onset of stress, really is a catch 22 situation. And this is the stage that one of my clients, Jeff, was in. He was a senior leader at a company where he was concerned. He was concerned about his success, the success of his team. So he worked more. He micromanaged more. He worked on weekends. He was miserable at work and at home. Now, I worked with him for the better part of a year, and he really did recognize his behaviors and the limitations he was putting on his own success by overworking. He turned things around, had a great year. Now, we had to work together really to focus on his performance. He was not looking to improve his fulfillment or satisfaction, but he improved both in the end. The third type, or the third stage, is chronic stress. Now, chronic stress is when the emoji, we start to dismiss the concerns. We shift our priorities and we deny there's a problem. But we have behavior changes that people in our lives start to worry about. This is a dangerous stage. This is a stage where we do not want to go to work. We want to check out. One of my clients, Kate, was at this stage when I met her. She had 8 more years with a company that she had worked at for 24 years, and she was just hanging on with everything she had because she thought she wanted to retire from that company. But she was miserable at work. So, looking at the misalignment of her talents, her skills, what brought her joy, we were able to figure out how she could get more of those things in her life, even at work, and turn things around for her. The fourth stage is burnout. This is when your symptoms become critical, chronic. You become more pessimistic. Maybe you have difficulty coping. You don't have healthy coping mechanisms. You start to withdraw. You become really disconnected. And you feel empty, lost, unsure. You have a desire to quit your job, or escape. Maybe just drop out for a while. I have not um, experienced the fifth stage. The fifth stage is habitual burnout, and I've not had clients in this stage. But this is the advanced stage where we really have a risk of physical and mental collapse. I have witnessed this stage happen with a colleague, though, and I can tell you, our small team, even though it was one person suffering from advanced stage burnout, our entire team was impacted. Being witness and caring about her during an extended absence and her recovery was not easy on anyone. So that's the 5 stages of burnout. And as I said, you can bounce around between them, as we often do. So I'm going to move on to what we can do because I know that you all want to hear about that. Anyone need a 7th inning stretch, though? Any questions or, again, new information, aha moments that you want to drop in the chat? It will be really helpful. I'm one who saves the chat, and I love looking at it after a presentation, whether I'm presenting or attending. So please feel free to continue dropping things. Emily says, can I hold up the cards? Oh, yes, so we can get a screenshot. Are you looking for these first 3 phases of burnout, Emily? Okay. Okay, prevention. What can you do? The first thing I'm going to suggest is increase your awareness, which you're doing now. Increase your awareness of the topic. Increase your awareness of yourself. Really start to know yourself, your tendencies, your behaviors, your motivation. It's very important to really take a look at. The second thing that you can do, which we don't do enough, is complete the stress cycle. Now, we experience stress every day, but in a stress cycle, we need to release stress every day. And I'm not talking about relaxing. You know, I like to say, um, let's see, numbing, indulging, or snoring, you know, Netflix, food, or sleep. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about completing the stress cycle daily. But completing the stress cycle is releasing the stress from your body. It is moving the energy. It is maybe exercising, sweating, releasing. And you see athletes do this all the time. Maybe if a basketball player is standing on the foul line, if that's what you call it, they're bouncing up and down, they're shaking their limbs. You hear a tennis player make a very big noise when they're hitting the ball. This is what I'm talking about with completing the stress cycle, and we need to do it daily. The third thing I'm going to recommend is time in nature. Get outside, off the pavement if you can, but just outside. Sunshine, fresh air, even cold weather. Time in nature because there are really healing properties in nature. The next thing is to connect with other human beings or your pets, but human beings every day. There is something about connection with other human beings that does not allow us to isolate ourselves or disconnect. Create some sense of belonging and purpose. Create a support circle. Ask for support, give support. And then the next thing, hijack your own brain. Question yourself and fact check. You know, start to become a little bit aware of your own blind spots. And then there's your nervous system. We need to be aware of our nervous system. We need to train or strengthen the side of our nervous system that is not our predominant side. We typically live in one side or another, not always, but it's our go to. My typical side was the, what is the side? It was not the rest and digest side. It was the stress side. It was the fight or flight. I did a lot of fighting. I rarely fled, but I did. So Strengthen the opposite side, your less dominant side of your nervous system. And this brings me to the rest. Rest daily. Now, Stephanie and I were just talking right before the presentation about some work. It's a TED Talk and a book by a Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith. She talks about the 7 types of rest, and you can learn more just by Googling her or listening to her TED Talk. 7 types: physical, mental, social, spiritual, sensory, creative, and emotional. Now, we are familiar with physical rest. We think about sleep or lounging. Physical rest can also be active. So there is passive physical rest and active mental rest, just taking a break from the mental work that you do. Social rest, sometimes just be alone. Your spiritual rest really just means being in touch with something greater than yourself, reminding yourself you are bigger than just a single person in a very big world. Sensory, this is so important in the way that we live now. The way that we live now, we are tied to electronics. We receive sensory data all day long, visually, hearing, feeling, tasting, seeing. We need to give ourselves a break from that sensory overload. And then creative rest. Creative rest is really that time when you might be doing nothing. You might be walking the beach, you might be laying in the grass looking at the clouds, you might be taking a hot shower. Creative rest are those times when we spur some creativity just by letting ourselves do something different. And emotional rest. So the last thing I'm going to suggest is create a plan and implement it. Have some strategies. Don't wait until it's too late to learn and change. You can ask a friend, a coworker, to serve as your accountability buddy. You can hire a coach. You can talk to your family. All of those things will help you to prevent burnout. Now, before we wrap up, I want to talk about what you can do to help other people, because we sometimes don't see it in ourselves. You may see a friend, a loved one, a coworker, a peer displaying some signs, some symptoms of burnout. What can you do in the world we live in where privacy is so important? We never want to be called out by someone that we don't trust. But there are things that you can do. So the first thing I'm going to suggest is, as they say when you're on an airplane, put your own oxygen mask on first. Take care of yourself. And that way you can model healthy behavior and boundaries and a healthy lifestyle. You can find that work-life balance or work-life integration, a healthy integration of all parts of your life, at home, at work, in your community. You can begin to talk openly and honestly with your peer, your friend, your loved one about your own challenges, your own experiences, and the safeguards that you're putting in place and the strategies you're using to prevent or recover from burnout. Talk about it. And then listen, 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 listen without dismissing someone else's feelings. You can validate their concerns just by letting them feel seen and heard. You don't have to agree with their perspective or share their experience, but you can care about them and support them just by listening. And then invite them, encourage them, check in with them. If you see someone who is on the verge of burnout, disconnecting, disassociating, disappearing, it's really, really important to connect with them. And I'm going to suggest that you connect not only verbally, verbally is great, much better than texting, but face-to-face connection. You know, I just want to tell you really quickly, my daughters, who are now 32 and 34, they were in college at the same time, 2 years apart. One was 7 hours away, one was 12 hours a day. When I spoke to them, I could hear it in their voice if they were okay. But better yet, when I saw them, when I could FaceTime them or whatever we did back then, I knew just by their expression, their coloring, maybe the expression in their eyes, if they were okay. And that is why we need to connect face to face or verbally with people. It's why I meet with my clients face to face, either remotely, virtually, using Zoom, or in person when I can. It is so important. And it's also important for you because connection will help you as well. And then encourage your friend, your coworker. Encourage them to take care of themselves, to get the help they need. Maybe they need to talk to a manager or a wellness practitioner. Maybe they even need to hire a coach or a therapist. Create a team and encourage them to create a team to help them with their own burnout. Now, one thing I do want to note is that burnout is not a problem that we can solve one person at a time. It's not something that we can solve individually. Yes, we can work on ourselves, we can get to know ourselves better, and we can help our friends. But burnout really is a systemic problem, and change is needed in the systems and organizations that we work in. In order for that to happen, we really must begin talking about burnout. We need to be asking for support at work, at home, and in our communities. So, phew, that was a lot. We covered the signs, the symptoms, the causes, preventative measures, and how to help someone else. And I want to leave you with just a couple final thoughts. If you if you are starting to see or recognize symptoms, signs, behaviors of burnout in yourself, say something. Ask for help. If you see a friend or colleague, a family member suffering from the signs and symptoms of burnout, do something. Offer support. Be there for them. Encourage them to get the help they need. And if you find yourself personally on the verge of quitting your job or shopping for a boss voodoo doll, call me. I'm here for you and I can help. I have been there through this cycle and I'm on the other side of it now. And that is what I want to help others do. You'll find my contact information in the chat. I dropped it in the very first thing I arrived this morning. You can also join me at table 1 when we finish up the presentation and go back into networking. And with that, Heather, do we have time for a few questions?
We do. So if anyone has any questions, you could feel free to type it into the Q&A. Also, if you want to come on stage and ask Laurel a question, you should be able to turn your camera on yourself by just clicking the camera on button. But if not, do your little thumbs up on your emoji and Stephanie or I will turn your camera on. So feel free to do that. I did want to say that, this time of year, as magical and wonderful as it is, like I said, a lot of people do experience burnout. And I'm glad that you shared some tips and tools. And if you see someone else experiencing that, and everybody who's part of our power breakfast, they're all dynamic, smart individuals. So I want to applaud that some of the people, I know Emily Nichols is one of them, only had a 4. So I am just impressed by the handful of people that were under 10 in that survey you did in the beginning, and for the rest of us. So thanks for giving us some of those tips. So we do have a question here. It says, what are some of the ways to release the stress at the end of the day?
The number one way, and this comes from a recommendation from a fairly new book on burnout, that is movement, physical movement, moving your body. And so the example often is when you see, I'm going to say a squirrel that gets nicked by a car and is down for the count, but then gets up, shakes it off, and moves on. That is one of the examples of a completion of a stress cycle, right? When we think about our nervous system, we go into fight or flight when we feel we are in danger. Stress makes us think that we're in danger, that we're unsafe. And so, what can you do every day at the end of the day? It could be 5 minutes of dancing in your living room, right? Move your body. It could be, if you have one of those mini trampolines, which I do, bouncing up and down for 5 minutes, shaking your arms and legs, right? Physical movement. And if you do have time to go to the gym, or to do something more vigorous, this is why I say, break a sweat, right? Move, move your body. That's the number one way to break that stress cycle. And the authors of this burnout book talk about that we experience stress every day. So our body, day after day, if we're not releasing it, we have this cumulative effect of danger that we carry with us, and it becomes embodied in our physiology. It starts to show up in physical symptoms. So movement is the number one way.
Could one thing Tabitha said, could you share the burnout prevention list, please? So if you could put that out, that'd be great. And as you were talking with me, you said like the squirrel example, shake it off. It just reminded me, so many sayings that we've heard growing up from, generation to generation. Now you realize some of the relevancy. Like, I don't know if you ever heard this, like playing sports, get up, shake it off, rub a little dirt in it. Well, there's some relevancy to what you're saying. Get up, shake it off, right? Don't stress about it. So yeah, if you could share that burnout prevention list, Tabitha,
Sure.
that would be great.
Can I hold up I don't know if I can do this, but I will hold it up in the note in front and see if you can do a screenshot. If not, we'll capture it and
yeah. So when she holds it up, if you want to see it full screen, click on the 4 white arrows and you'll see just Laurel and not me, and then it'll be in a bigger picture for you if you want to take your camera out. But it will be on.
If I can do this.
And also, I don't know if we mentioned, I probably didn't, but if you're a regular, we record this whole presentation. So this will be in the recording too, that Stephanie will put up on the Alliance YouTube channel probably by the end of the week. Emily says she got it. Okay. Yep. So perfect. I think I got the list right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Stephanie also said that we can send that out after the presentation in the email. So if Laura's willing to send that, then we can have that in the email afterwards. So we will do that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Any other
questions? It's a lot of information.
Yeah. Like I said, if you want to join on camera, I get it. You might not be camera ready, but it doesn't matter. It's we're a very welcoming environment. So if you're still in your PJs, it's okay. But any other questions for Laurel? I had a question actually. So I was wondering, so you mentioned some tips for people, but I'm wondering how delicately, because I've been in situations before where I've noticed, and with like a very good friend, but I didn't want to be like overstep my bounds or have them be insulted, but I just wanted to let them know like I was there. Or do you have any suggestions on how to do that so it is delicate, where someone's like, no, I'm fine, like what are you doing, like leave me alone?
Oh, this is tricky. Because as I said, no, we don't want to be called out by someone else that sees our shortcomings, right? Especially in the workplace. So there has to be some trust in that relationship. But one of the ways that you could do it is simply by, I'll say, small talk. If you happen to mention, oh, you heard this presentation on burnout and it got you thinking about yourself. Sometimes when we talk about our own experience and things that we're thinking about or seeing in ourselves, it's just enough to have people think about it for themselves. But depending on the relationship, you could also say, I'm worried about all of us. I'm worried about you. I'm worried about our team. I'm worried about the culture in our workplace, right? a heartfelt worry can be expressed in an unthreatening way. Um, you know, in an extreme situation, um, and and I've seen this happen, do you have a and some way to confidentially, if it's in the workplace, to confidentially raise a concern with your manager about someone else? Can you do that? Maybe it might not be your manager, maybe it might be an HR professional, right? I have, I have a concern that one of my coworkers is at the verge of collapse, right? Is exhibiting some signs of insomnia, whatever it might be. Um, but you really have to know, kind of the culture in which you work. Can you do that?
Yeah, good point. Okay, we're almost out of time for Q&A to wrap up. Any other last questions anyone may have? I think we're good. So like Laurel said,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much, Laurel. Really appreciate it.